Thanks very much for that, Darren and Lockie. We do have a couple of questions that have come up already. The first one that came through was from Rod Nielsen, and he's asked, were you able to get any data from hunters active in the study area during that time? And I'd probably extend that based on what you were just saying, Darren, and say, so how do you think that engagement of local communities would work?
The biggest mistake I made across all of my 6 collaring sites was not engaging the hunters enough. We actually had sites where hunters were out to directly target the collared animals and shoot them, kill them, destroy them. If you find Darren Marshall, gut him and put him in a chiller box, he's going to get rid of all the pigs. A massive issue we had with hunters. But when we spent the time to engage with them and actually work with them, and they worked out how valuable this data was for them as well, then that was really, really effective. The challenging part I still have is we cannot dismiss hunting as a control technique for 2 reasons. One is it's always going to be there. The second one is if you've got one big lone boar that's killing 20 or 30 lambs every night and a hunter comes in with his dogs and takes that big boar out, that's a pretty good outcome. So, it's hard because your other response to that could be, we know damn well hunting goes nowhere near taking out 70% of the population. So we definitely cannot rely on hunting alone, but we need to consider that. But from an engagement point of view, extremely important because they are a valuable part of the community, just like everybody else, and we have to consider them when we're controlling pigs.
Yeah, and I think we did a really good job of it on this project. We had community meetings every month to give updates on what we actually took out and where we were going to and what we were looking at doing next. And we didn't have any impact from I guess hunters going out there to ruin it. One thing which I did find I guess a little funny was the hunters that were in the area weren't getting any pigs. Between the chopper and the trapping, and the baiting at the end, they weren't even wasting their time. They for that area they gave up. They went into other areas.
Okay, thanks for that. Regina's asked, do you know how many pigs were thought to be in the area before you started the kill versus then what you found in the area after it? So we've got the population difference, but what was the growth difference, I suppose?
Yeah, good luck. Yeah, we didn't really have an idea of what the pig population was before we started. We knew there was pigs from previous studies, but that's why we monitored with the thermal survey at the start to get that I guess that index at the start before we did anything.
And that question's brilliant, isn't it? Because that is so important. I mean, we do all this control, but we can't go back to the community with a tangible number of what, and that's what a lot of people want. They want to know what they've taken out. That's why so many people love trapping over baiting, because they can actually see what they've destroyed, even though it might only be a very small percentage compared to what could have been destroyed. So, there's a whole lot of work which Heather touched on before in terms of looking at thermal aerial surveys, camera monitoring, all of these different ways to monitor to give the community back good information about their population before and after. Because if we can show that they are making a difference, perhaps that'll increase motivation.
Okay. Andrew's asked the $64 million question. Lockie, what would you do differently? Would you increase or decrease the effort of certain control measures? If you had to do this again, real scenario, what would make it more effective?
I don't know whether to make it more effective, but what I'd love to compare is to flip it around. So not have so much of an aerial shoot impact on it, but do the baiting first. Really smash the pigs with baiting and then come in with aerial shooting at the end to mop it up to see whether that way of, I guess, implementing those 2 control techniques would take out the pig population, would have a more of an effect on that pig population. So yeah, I'd swap it. I'd do the baiting first, followed up by the aerial shooting rather than aerial shooting for each month.
And just to add to that, and it might not be practical if it was a disease outbreak situation, but you probably need to let the pigs settle down between control techniques. So Lockie would be out there free feeding his heart out. He'd just get pigs into traps. He'd just get them free feeding and the damn helicopter would come back. And of course, that'd scatter all the pigs, maybe not shooting them all. So, I think we need to be really smart about implementing a control technique correctly to its maximum potential before we start on the next control technique.
Yeah, so would you do that still with integrating the techniques within the same time period, or would you do a big hit with baiting, for instance, then move to the shooting and then move to the trapping?
You could, in my mind, straight off the top of my head, you could integrate trapping and baiting because there's always going to be landholders that won't bait. So you could definitely integrate those two. But I would keep the aerial shooting separate from those control techniques that require you to habituate the population to get them used to coming to feed. And that's trapping.
Right. Yep, okay. Graham Owens asked, did you do any thermal surveys while the collared pigs were running around? And if you did you have a better success rate in identifying them?
So no, the thermal surveys were before the collars were put onto the pigs, and then once in the final shoot that we had in May, we targeted those collared pigs as well, and then the thermal survey went out after that. So no, we didn't have any pigs in the ground.
Yeah, okay. So we haven't really got an indication of how effective the thermal survey is as well in finding all of them.
It's tricky, isn't it?
The thermal survey is definitely only an index. It definitely does not get anywhere near all of them. It's only an index measurement, and I think the thermal's got a little way to go before it's up there with the aerial survey and stuff like that. I'll just leave in dark. And maybe a few people won't agree with that. But,
and it's important to note we've still got those 40 cameras on ground in those core home ranges. So we're going to compare what the on-ground cameras say to what we've got with the thermal survey as well.
Yeah, okay. And Sheridan's made the point that baiting in or adjacent to national parks is problematic because of the potential impacts on native species. Would you have recommendations for that? Would you do something different?
National parks are always very, very supportive. Always contribute in the nil tenure approach. And I think we could debate this for a long time, but 99% of the literature says that those control techniques enhance native wildlife, not impact on them. So I think done correctly, baiting is a good thing, and national parks in every one of our projects, national parks is always they're always taking a lot of darts. They're always taking a lot of the blame. And then they love these collaring projects because often the collaring projects prove to that community that the pigs don't spend that much time in the national parks because the 15% protein levels that they're chasing are actually out in the productive country and not in the parks. So maybe they're just on the fringes getting a bit of shelter if needed, but they're spending most of their time in the productive country of the sites that we have followed.
Yeah, okay. And Linton's backed up with the knockdown of even 60%. If you could go greater than that over an intensive period of 4 months, would that be fast enough to stop an FMD outbreak, even if you got there?
I mean, no, right? The answer to that's no, and we need to be ready. We need to have the artillery lined up. We need to have the tools in the toolbox ready to go. I mean, Lockie pointed out before, one of the things that we'd really like to do is to bait first because you keep that population quiet. You're not stirring them up. And so, I think we need to be smart about all of that because obviously in a disease critical time is of the essence.
Yeah, that certainly is. There's a couple of questions around the trapping that was done. Which type of trap was most effective? And if you went to a larger trap, would that be more effective than, say, a smaller trap with willingness for the pigs to enter?
Yeah, definitely. So the more successful traps for this project were the panel traps because they were larger. I mean, with the box traps, and especially the landholder box traps, some of them don't have the biggest doors. So the bigger the entry and the more comfortable you can make it for those pigs, the better. And I think the other thing to add to that is sometimes a trap can become too big, but you need to be keeping the feed up to them. This needs to be their primary food source. Whatever they're feeding on out there in the paddock, you need to be drawing them off that and making sure that when they come to this trap, they're staying there full. So a lot of the time when we had the cameras up on these traps, we were keeping the tucker up to them that these pigs would camp in and around these traps even if they weren't set, because they were comfortable and they knew that they were going to get their I guess all of their dinner and breakfast and lunch there.
Yeah. Look, there's still a number of questions there. I'll put the last one down around a platform to share some of this data. People would like to see the data. How can they get the data, and how can they use it to perhaps go into their networks and dispel some of the myths, maybe change the angle about some of the stories that are out there about feral pig movement and management?
We're happy to talk to anyone. We would have to speak to LLS because we did this project in partnership with them, but they are very sharing and willing. And any of the collaring stuff, we're more than happy to help out with and do. Just get in contact and let's talk about the possibilities.
Yeah, okay. Thanks very much, Darren. Thanks very much, Lachlan. That was really, really interesting. There's still questions are coming in. Everyone that's still got questions, I'm sorry we can't cover them all, but please continue to put them through and we'll address those on the website, as we said earlier. And obviously contact Darren and Lachie